project we're going to do is what I call the Egyptian earrings. They're known by several names: Victorian earrings, Egyptian earrings, others. There's some possibility for design variations on this, and I'm going to go over those. I'll do one earring, and then I will do one pendant version of the earring. Of course, you would normally make two earrings. One of the variations is these are earrings mounted on post, and I have Austrian crystals. Little green color is very nice. Another variation is this, where we're using French ear wires and glass beads. The third variation is a pendant, and on this we use two more beads, makes it a little larger piece, attach a articulating piece at the bottom, and put a bail on it. I'll show you this wrap bail, which can be applied to any pendant. You can use just about any kind of a bead, and what I recommend is a bead roughly 4 millimeters in diameter. All of these beads are in that range. These are all glass beads. You can use pearls, but be aware that if you use small pearls, you'll almost assuredly have to drill them, because the holes that they string the pearls on are very small. So these beads run $4 to $8 depending on where you buy them. As I say, these are glass beads. You can also use Austrian crystal beads like this. These are glass beads also, although they look like pearls. So there are a lot of different possibilities with this earring. It's very popular right now, and it makes a very nice and elegant piece. The wire for this project, again, the primary wires, I use 22 gauge soft square gold filled, and we cut the primary wires 7 pieces, each 3 inches long, and we use progressive cutting techniques. I've started to cut those wires, and this is for the earring. And for the earring, we cut 7 wires. Again, with the progressive cutting technique, I just start at one end of the wire, keep moving in the same direction, using the first wire as a guide. Very important that you count your wires and have 7. And I have 7 there. Once I get the wires cut and assembled in a bundle, I check to make sure that they all line up. Again, taping the bundle flat in the last 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. So this is what I have. And there's the tape. Again, we do it this way so we can just pull this off the end when we get through. You'll need about 2.5 or 3 inches for each earring, and about 3.5 inches or so for the. And a good safe procedure is to mark the center of this bundle of primary wires. So they're 3 inches long. Straighten them out here a little bit. So and just put just a mark. That's all you need. Just a little mark in the middle, like that. And with the flat nose pliers right out on the end, again, I'll bend this back and offset it to my left as I look at it, just like that. And again, I'll hook it this way, and then I'm going to make 5 wraps toward the end of the bracelet, or the end of the earring, and it's this taped in. It's going to be the top of the earring. Just a review of the wrapping procedure. The first wrap I put on and wrap without the use of the pliers, and I grab the bundle with the pliers, and as I wrap, I offset this wire as I bring it over to fall over the previous wire, and then as I use my flat nose pliers to put it in place, it just snaps right in next to that previous wire. As I say, you get very adept at this very quickly. Okay, there's 5 wraps. Now, frequently when you make the first wrap, you get a hump, just a hump in it that sticks up higher than the subsequent wraps. To get rid of that hump, you take this, and this is the reason I leave this short end over here that sticks out beyond the primary wires. I grab that short end, that's the first of my first wrap. I unwrap this a quarter of a turn, and then I pull on the short wire and I push on the primary bundles, create tension on the wire, and re-wrap it. And now, as you can see, the wrap, that little hump on the wrap is gone. So there we are. Okay. I'll back it off and cut. I cut it roughly 1/3 of the way across the flat wires. Again, that makes a little stronger wrap, and I need to put another wrap on here. Okay, and here we are. Now I take my knife. Again, it's required to have a very thin back on the knife, on the blade. Spine, I guess they call it. We're going to spread these wires out a little bit. We're going to make them look like a garden rake. So I bring the knife, as I face the front of the earring, I bring it down and I offset that roughly 45 degrees. And offset that one 45 degrees. I come to the next one and do the same with it. Next one on the other side, make them somewhat the same, and finally the last two. So I have, this is what I have now. It does look a little bit like a garden rake. Observe that I leave the center wire, which is the 7th wire of this 7-wire bundle, or the center wire of the 7, it remains straight. I'm going to use a little bit larger bead because I think it'll be easier to see on the tape. So these beads are available at just about any bead shop in a variety of colors. So we start now that we have our primary bundle, primary wires in a bundle, and we bring the first bead down close to the wrap wires. And I do the same on the other side. Just to note, as you're looking for beads, the primary consideration is that the beads have holes large enough for this 22 gauge square wire to go through. It's you might even take a small piece with you when you're shopping and compare the hole to the wire to be sure that the beads will work. Slide the first two beads down, and I want to maintain, as I say, symmetry. They should be directly across from one another. I'll bring the second bead down just on top of the first bead. On both sides. The first two beads go on differently than the last ones. On the first two, we put two beads on before we tie them into place. All right, so this is what I have. Now then, I'm looking at the front of the earring. This will be the part that's visible as it's on the ear. Now I bring the first outside wire up between the two subsequent wires, and I bring it around like that. Then I go to the other side of the earring and I bring this wire through between those two wires. We want this over here. This is the reason we use soft wire on this project. It's hard wire will not work. Okay, so we have our first two beads. And now I'll bring these on around and I'll cut them as they meet themselves. And I'll use my chain nose pliers to line those two wires up. Just bring them down on themselves and close like that. Just force this down. And close. So this is what I have now. Then these are the wires to the side. And I just bring them around on themselves and I say yes, and close them. Okay. Now we bring the next two wires, or next two beads, down on the wires that are adjacent to the center wire. These holes are a little tight, but they work. And I want to overlap. I want the bead to overlap like the first one did, just comes adjacent to the top if you manipulate this wire so that they do fit that way. And as I said in the introductory tape, I recommend you wear magnification. Makes it easier to see those tiny holes. Okay, again, I want these two wires, these two beads even, level even. And I'll bring the next outside wire around just as I did before, on each side. Again, I'm bringing it from the front through to the back and around to the front again. Just bring it on around. Okay, and then we'll recheck. We want to be sure that they're symmetrical again. With the soft wire, you can manipulate these a little bit and just to keep them looking correct. All right, now we'll slide the seventh bead on the center wire. If I can get it. Occasionally you may have to use a little bead reamer to clear these holes out a little bit. And we want them to overlap the same as the other beads have. Now we bring each of the remaining outside wires around. A little bit short. These are longer beads, and so normally you'll have more wire than what we've ended up with here. And we'll bring the last remaining outside wire around. Bring it around, and then cut. Bring this one around. And cut. Squeeze it back on itself. And the same with this one. I need to cut that just a little bit. This is where really good, sharp flush cutters come in handy. Okay. All right, so that's the bead part of the earring. We're going to add an articulating addition down here with another bead or some gold beads or something that would complement the design. To make this, I'm going to form a loop down here. Like this. And observe that the loop, as you look at it straight on, you just see a piece of wire. And the other loop we'll put in the piece that we're going to add to it, and it will be in the opposite direction. So to make that loop, I bend this extended center wire directly out toward me, like that. And one thing you can do to make this easier to work on, since we haven't tied these wires in except through the center, you can pull the center wire down, and it makes it a little easier to work on. Then when we get through with the loop, we can pull it back through. So I've bent this extended center wire toward me 90 degrees. And now then I grab it right at the end of my round nose pliers. And I put the round nose pliers right in the bend. Push this wire around like this. And then I'll come beyond. It's hard to do with your fingers when it's this short, but since it's soft wire, it's fairly easy to manipulate. And then I'll cut this right where these two wires cut on the inside of that loop. Make sure you just cut the loop part of the wire, not the extended part. Then I can mash these flat and close it up. Now then I can push this wire back through, or I could go to the other end and grab it and pull it back through, and I'll probably do that. Pushing is a little harder than pulling. Okay, now we're going to take the tape off the other end, and again, the reason that we wrapped it like this is so that we could just pull on it like this and it will come right off, hypothetically. And observe that we still have this wire extended a little bit, and I'm going to leave it that way until we get this next part on. I'm going to add another bead down here to so we can get some movement, and it'll be something like this. In this case, I'm going to use two small gold beads, and I'm going to use another bead like this. You could use a contrasting crystal or additional gold beads or whatever. And I'm going to place this bead between two small gold fill beads. All of these beads and fittings are available from your local bead shop or by mail order. And boy, is that hole hard to find. There it is. To attach this, I use a beader's head pin. As you can see, it looks a little bit like a small pin with a head on it. And again, you can find this at your local bead shop. And all of these components are gold filled. So that's what I have, and then the problem with finding the hole is that there's a reflection in it under the lights. And okay, so I've just strung these on. In this case, you can use a much smaller bead because this is much finer. So again, to make this loop, and I'm going to make it just like I made the last one, I'll take a very small chain nose pliers, the ones I always use, and I slide right down to that bead, and just as before, I bend it 90 degrees, like that. Okay, then again with the round nose pliers, I take those right to that bend, or that 90-degree bend right where I bent it. And again, I push this over with my finger, about like that. And I reposition the pliers and put the other nose in. Then I bring this wire by hand, like that. So that's what I have now. And with the flush cutters, I'll cut the loop right where it crosses. Right where it crosses the other wire. Right there. Okay. Now then, this is offset, so I will, well, I'll straighten this out a little. And I'll hook it through the other wire like that. This is pretty fine wire here, so maybe a little bit difficult to see. I'll just bring this in like that to close it. So there it is. Okay. So this is what we have up to this point. Now then, I'm going to pull the center wire. I'll separate these just slightly on the top. 3 wires on each side and leave the center wire straight. And I can pull that back up through adjacent to. Just pull it up until it's tight on the bottom. Okay. Now then, we're going to form rosettes. And these are rosettes. We have 3 wires on each side, so we'll have 3 rosettes on each side. Center wire we'll later make our loop and attach the ear wire to it. To make a rosette, on this particular project, I measure up 3/4 of an inch from the top of the wraps. And I want to mark the 2 outer wires. And I'm going to separate those 2 outer wires on each side. Like that. And I'm going to cut them. I want to cut these even. Across. If they're not quite even, make an adjustment and try to make them very even. So there we are. About like that. Now to make the rosettes, I have a special pair of pliers. I start the rosette with very small loops right at the end of my round nose pliers. And I'm just going to make the first part of the loop. Make them very small. Just like that. I'm going to do the same on both sides. Again, I come right out to the end of the pliers, round nose pliers. And very important that this beginning be symmetrical. I can maybe make this a little bit tighter here. Otherwise, they just don't look quite the same. Okay. I'll mash that flat. All right. With this special pair of pliers, and the description of these are they're very, for wire work, they're very heavy, flat nose pliers with a thick spine, because you can exert a lot of pressure on these and they don't give. So to do that rosette, I first grab this at the end of my pliers and observe that I'm only about halfway across the loop. And I begin to roll. And I never go beyond the loop. And I'm just making very small bites and rolling this level. I'm just rolling the wire up on itself, just like coiling a piece of rope or a hose, and I keep rolling, and I'm going to roll this until it's about 3/4 of the way down the wrap wires and slightly in. Now I'm going to do the same with my other loop, and observe that I'm not getting beyond the loop. If you get your pliers over here, your scroll won't be even. You'll have humps in it. Just keeping rolling. Some people do this with their chain nose pliers, but they get a big bite, and okay. Here are the first two, and they're fairly even. Now I come back to the next two wires, and they too are the same length. And I start the next little loop, just as before, just taking small bites, keeping it small right on the end of the round nose pliers. Okay. Again. Okay. I just roll that right up over the previous rosette. Guess that's fairly close. All right. The next two wires, I mark up 5/8 of an inch, a little shorter than the first two rosettes, and this will result in making a smaller rosette. If you look at this, you can see when they're shorter, they come in a little bit further, and they're not quite as large. Again, we cut those even. And I do the same thing. Okay, so that's what we have now. The last step is to attach our ear wire. And again, I'll bring this straight out toward me. I'll make the loop just like I made the one below. Get the round nose right in there. Push this over. Then reposition my pliers with the bottom, what was the bottom jaw, out and bring it beyond. Like that. And cut it right where they cross. And I'll put my ear wire on, be sure and get it. You know, I was wrong. We make this one to the side. Like that. If you get it wrong like I did, why, that's all you do. Instead of bending it 90 degrees towards you, you bend it 90 degrees to the side. Of course, the reason is so that the ear wire will, the earring will hang perpendicular to the wire. And close it. There we go. It's the finished earring. Very popular right now, and as you can see, very easy to make. Okay, that completes our earring.